for the student. The students take you to a very low level and start from the basics for the benefit of a company law is not a difficult subject. Keep that in mind. And it's a very, very easy subject when you study it properly. And also you must keep in mind that company law, especially corporate law, is very helpful for everybody, especially now you all are budding lawyers. And I'm sure whether you practice or join any other corporate body or join the Aegis department or the judiciary or whatever sector you want to get into, corporate law will be absolutely helpful. I can tell you with experience. I myself, of course, I'm a practitioner for the last 34 years, and I might be able to explain the principles as well as the case law behind company law in Sri Lanka. Now, just to give a brief background to company law in Sri Lanka, as you know, we were under the British from 18. We have had funny situations in Sri Lanka. We had the Portuguese from 1505 to 1656, 150 years. Fortunately, they didn't bring any laws with them. Then from 1656 to 1796, we had the Dutch. They brought with them some part of the law, which is known as the Roman Dutch law. And then in 1796, the Britishers came in, and in 1815, they took over the entire country. And from 1815, they were here till 1948. And so we had the influence of the Portuguese for 150 years, Dutch for 150 years, and Britishers for 150 years till 1948, where we got independence. Now, since we were under the British, even after 1948, even prior to that, the British law applied, English law applied. And from 1948 onwards, also we followed the English law to a great extent when it comes to commercial matters. Now, company law was no exception. In fact, the birthplace of company law is England. It's English law applies for company law, but maybe not anymore. So our statutes, which applied in Sri Lanka, the Joint Stock Companies Act 100% English law. Then 1938 Companies Ordinance, 100% English law. Then the Companies Act number 17 of 1982, again, the law that was there in England in 1948. But the new Act, Act number 7 of 2007, is a deviation of the English law. I will tell you why it has been done so. We followed the latest mechanisms of modern company law, which was actually the Canadian model, which is followed by so many jurisdictions like Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, and even in England. So we borrowed it from actually the Canadian model was brought to New Zealand, and we followed the New Zealand model. And our Act number 7 of 2007, which came into operation after 5-10 years of deliberation, is not purely English law, but with various new modifications which are brought in to make it a modern law. So the law we have today is Act number 7 of 2007. It's not anymore new. And that covers the entirety of company law in Sri Lanka. Nothing out of it. So what exactly is company law? Right. Company law, this is the introduction. Company is also like a human being. When a human being is born, you've got to register the birth, right? Parents know you have to give a couple of days argument, and you got to register your birth. Now, your actual life, the life with regard to activity starts with your birth certificate. Imagine your life without a birth certificate. You can't get a school, you can't get a passport. There are so many things that happens with that birth certificate. So then your life, you are a toddler, then you start walking, and you go 5 years, you go to school, then you grow up, you have your primary education, secondary education, tertiary education, and then after your university, you will find a job, and then you get married, you have children, then you get into old age, and maybe after 70 or 80 or 90, well, you die. And when you die, you have to get a death certificate. Your people will have to get the death certificate. Without the death certificate, you can't do anything with your estate. You can't even cremate without the death certificate. So a human being's life cycle is between the birth certificate and the death certificate. The things I just told you. The same way, when a company is incorporated, the company gets a certificate of incorporation. That's somewhat similar to the birth certificate. Then you go on. I told you the growth of the child to the adult to the death certificate. You see, the same way, when you start a company, there are so many things you do, right? You get a certificate of incorporation. That's your basically the birth certificate. Then you must have shares, you must have capital, you must have people to run, directors, you must have a constitution, articles, then you must have meetings, you have pass resolutions, you have to borrow funds, you have to enter into contracts, and you go on, there are disputes, and finally, when you're not in a position to go on any further, you wind up the company. And then you get a certificate from the registrar of companies saying that your name has been struck off the register, which is basically the death certificate. Like a human being cycle is from the certificate of incorporation to that death certificate where the registrar certifies that you're no more and strikes your name off. So what happens in between is the cycle of a company. See, that is all these, the entirety of company law, corporate law, when you look at it, if you look at any textbook, this is all but company law. There is no more. So if you know this, you know your company. Today, teach you very basics of company law so that you will understand in a better context in just 15 points, right? This is the best way to, so that you have a bird's eye entire subject. That is very important. Point number one, right? Separate legal existence. Once a company is incorporated, the company is separate from its members, like a human being. Say, John Keels is like another human being. A human being can be sued under its own name. Same way, John Keels can be sued, can sue under its own. A lot of rights you get with your separate legal existence. Now, point number one is separate legal existence. Now, that comes with a principle that has been laid down long years ago in a case called Salomon versus Salomon and Company. Now, Mr. Salomon was a shoemaker. His business was getting bigger, so he expanded. There were other shareholders who came in, put in money, debentures, and then when he was not doing well, he wanted to sue Salomon and Company. Mr. Salomon wanted to sue Salomon and Company. So the others said this is very unfair. Mr. Salomon and Salomon and Company are the same, but the court said no. Mr. Salomon is separate. Salomon and Company is separate. Mr. Salomon can sue Mr. Salomon and Company. That was the principle of separate legal existence. Any company law book starts with this. That's the number one case. It was followed later on in New Zealand also in a case called Lee versus Lee's Air Farming, where Mr. Lee was, in Singapore, in New Zealand, they have this big estates, right? Farming. And he had a air farming, these little planes where they go and spray water, pesticides and whatever. And this chap, when he was doing this, crashed the plane and died. So Mrs. Lee sued Lee's Air Farming. Well, the others said, this is very unfair. You're trying to sue your own company. But the court said, no, it is separate legal existence, and they followed Salomon versus Salomon and Company. Now, the same thing was followed in a case in Sri Lanka, well known as the Oberoi case. Trade Exchange Ceylon Limited versus Asian Hotels Corporation. Asian Hotels Corporation was running the presently known as Cinnamon Grand, earlier known as Oberoi. And they had little shops, and Asian Hotels Corporation had a major shareholding of about 75% by the state through CWE. corporate wholesale establishment. So these batik shops they were having, they wanted to get a writ against Trade Exchange Ceylon Limited, wanted to get a writ against Asian Hotels Corporation. So then when they went for the writ, the court said no. Just because you own 75%, it doesn't make it a corporate body, a public body. So therefore, the writ was not available. They followed Salomon versus Salomon. One is the separate existence, right? Now, here onwards, from 2 to 15, we talk about our own law and the Act. Act number 7 of 2007 covers all the branches I've just discussed, right? It has 534 sections, 13 schedules, and 46 forms, right? Now, the 534 sections cover the entire gamut of company law in Sri Lanka. 13 schedules and 46 forms are there basically for you to, change of directors, change of secretaries, change of name of the company, change of registered office, all that is done by the company secretary. So the repository of all these documents is the Registrar of Companies, ROC office down DR Vijayawardena Mawatha. It's called the Samagam Madura, where they maintain all the records of companies. Right now, there are very many ways you can do business. You can do business by a single share, by sole proprietorship. That won't come under company. Mr. Perra can do a shop and say Colombo Stores. Well, that Colombo Stores has no separate legal existence and won't come under the Companies Act. If you want to sue Colombo Stores, you have to sue Mr. Pereira, carrying on business under the name, style, and firm of Colombo Stores and such entities. Partnerships don't come under the company law. 2-3 fellows people can get together and form a partnership. Julius and Creasy. Well, Mr. Julius and Mr. Creasy have died 150 years ago. But partners carry on with the partnership. There again, if you want to sue the partnership, if you want to sue Julius and Creasy, you got to sue so and so, so and so, so and so, carrying on business under the name, style, and firm of Julius and Creasy at whatever it is, right? Audit firms, architects firms, they have the same thing. And KPMG, Ford Rhodes, Coopers and Lybrand, Ernst & Young, all these are partnerships. So those are 2 ways you can do business, no issue at all, not governed by the company law. As long as you pay your taxes, government will be happy. There are so many businesses as partnerships. Even Maharajas were partnerships for a recent time. Under the company law, under our Companies Act, under the 534 sections, there are different types of companies that can be created, right? So point number 2 is the different types of companies under our Companies Act. You have limited liability, unlimited liability, and guarantee companies, right? So limited liability is you're paying if there is in a winding up situation, if the assets are not enough to meet the liabilities, the shareholders have to chip in according to their liabilities. If you're a 50% shareholder, and if the deficit is 10 years, you will have to chip in for your 50%, 5 million. That is called limited liability. Unlimited liabilities, there are very, very, very few limited liability companies. Guarantee company is another faculty, I will tell you. So under our law, under the Companies Act, you can form a single shareholder company. This again was brought in for the first time under this particular act. Section 4, subsection 1 sets out what a single shareholder company is. And who are the people who can create a single shareholder company? Any human being, an individual corporate body, or the secretary to the treasury. So you can form a company, you can have your directors, you can do whatever business you want. It's a single shareholder company. Generally, you say company is 2 and maybe 3 is a traffic jam, but here under the statute, it says 1 is also company. So single shareholder companies. Then 2-3 people can get together and form a private company. It's another category of companies. Private company, no problem. You can have your own share transferability is limited, right? First is the single shareholder company. Second one is the private company. Then thirdly, you have a public company, more than a small number. Public listed company, a large number of members, PLC, right? That is, you get public to come and invest in your company. They are called PLC, Sampath Bank PLC, HNB PLC, right? Alis PLC. So they are bigger companies listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. So you have the first one, single shareholder company, second one, private company, then you have a public company, and the fourth one is a public listed company or the PLC. Fifth company is the guarantee company. Now, guarantee company is created for non-profit. Most of the educational institutions, Cancer Society, we want to make it a company. All those, they have objects. They don't make profit. All the profits that is made are plowed back to the business. So if you come and ask me, well, I'm getting some funding from Canada, I want to do social service for the people who are suffering from COVID. What sort of company should I start? I will say incorporate a guarantee company. There are no shareholders. A few members are there who are the subscribers, and you can appoint your board of directors to carry on with the business. And you can have objects. You must have objects in a guarantee company. It's not necessary to have objects in any other company unless for certain reasons. And then you basically run your business. So those are the different types of companies that can come under our Companies Act. That is the single shareholder company, private company, public listed company, and a guarantee company, right? So there are mechanisms set out in our Companies Act how this will work. Starting of companies, all that is. So first point is the different types of the separate corporate existence. Second point is the different types of companies. And third point is the certificate of incorporation. Come to the third point. That is Section 5 of our Companies Act speaks about the certificate of incorporation. As you register your birth and get your birth certificate, there are a couple of things you've got to satisfy where you incorporate your company and you get a certificate. You can hang it on your company premises, or you might need it for several other taxation purposes. There, it's called the certificate of incorporation. It's a simple thing that to say that the company with this particular name at this particular registered place of business, you started this company either as a private company, guarantee company, or PLC or whatever from such and such a date. That's very important. Whenever we file action, now that is a public document that is in the register of company. Now you know there is the EROC. You can download anything online, and that is point number 3. And point number 4 is a fairly important point. It's called the Articles of Association. Point number 4 is the Articles of Association. Now each company must have articles. Articles is basically your constitution. In fact, articles in New Zealand is called the constitution of the company. You know, everywhere in Sri Lanka, we have a constitution. Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, 1978 constitution. Basically, the constitution, now you have in schools and your universities, you have had, you know, if you have been at Leo's or Lions or JC's or Interact Club or Rotary, or in your schools, Christian Brotherhood, Buddhist Brotherhood, Economic Society, whatever, you have a constitution. Now, what does that constitution say? Well, the name of this the society is this. We will have a president, we will have a vice president, we'll have a treasurer, we have a secretary, we'll meet once a month, we'll have office bearers. These are our objectives. Every school you would have been, all you students would have been, or members of the university, whatever, right? You have alumni, you will have a society, constitution. So that's an internal document. So Articles of Association is an internal document for your day-to-day running. Articles will say we will have a chairman, deputy chairman, we will have board of directors, we will have financial director, the director HR, director marketing, and we will have X number of executive directors, non-executive directors, and all those details, right? How to have meetings, when to have meetings, board meetings, shareholders meetings. Oh, that's internal document. That is not for public consumption, but if you want to look at it, it's a public document at the ROC. Every company must have an articles of association. Now, that is a mandatory requirement when you form a company. Now, right now, we don't have a mandatory requirement, and we did away with that in the 7 of is basically internal rules, and it is also a contract among the shareholders and the company. Contract among themselves, contract the shareholders have with the company, contract the shareholders have with directors. It's a bunch of contracts. Before 7 of 2007, actually 7 of 2007, we did away with the doctrine of ultra vires. Now, doctrine of ultra vires was a fairly rigid thing which came from the memorandum of association. Under the old act, we had a memorandum of association. Even in England, they did away with in year 2000. Because the memorandum of association brought in two major clauses called the objects clause, primary objects and ancillary objects. Primary objects, what you would do in the first 5 years, and ancillary objects, what you would do thereafter. Both were hindered. There was this famous Turkonsky case. Every time when you have outsider has to do business, they have to check to see whether that company has the capacity to do that business. And under the old law, under section 7, you had to, it was very rigid to change businesses because you have to be within your objects. You have to act within the intra vires. Everything you did was, if anything outside that was ultra vires. So that's called the doctrine of ultra vires. That hindered. Now you have no objects clause or memorandum of clause. If you want, you can put your objects in your articles, not mandatory. Certain companies where they get BOI blessings, BOI insists that they have the objects clause. Because if they give facilities, tax facilities, benefits for garment industries, they have to do only garments. Say prawn cultivation, they have to do only prawn business. So you can't. So sometimes banks giving loans, they will insist that you must have in your articles an objects clause. Otherwise, you don't need to have objects. So you put up a hotel today, maybe because of COVID, nothing is happening. Tomorrow you can make it a tuition house or a wedding parlor. And under the old regime, you could not do that. So now it's fairly flexible. So articles of association is the internal document that basically tells you what your business is. And section 13 of the Companies Act deals with the articles of association. What are things that should be there? There is a schedule 1 gives the model articles, right? Earlier also it was schedule 1. Model articles are there, and you can see what articles are when you look at something, because that gives the internal management part of it. Then you come to the 5th point, shareholders and share capital. Now, a company to do business, you need funds, you need capital. So how do you raise capital? You have to get shareholders, right? So shareholders, the main thing you got to share capital. The share capital is created by shareholders. They put in money. So there are only 3 ways you can become a shareholder. That is initial rights issue, initial share issue, secondly the rights issue, and thirdly the bonus issue. Initial share issue is where you put out prospectus and say this is what you are going to do, and then people come and invest. That is the initial share. Rights issue is something you are given the existing shareholders the right to buy another share or whatever number at a discount. If the share is going at 100 rupees, you're telling the existing shareholders you can buy another 10 shares at 50 rupees. Bonus issue is you give the existing shareholders free shares in addition to what you have. You're giving it summa. So that is a bonus issue. So these are for ordinary shares. Now, ordinary share is the risk-bearing share. Because if the company makes profits, they can declare dividends, and you may get a return for your investment. But if the company doesn't make profits, you may not get anything. As against, there are other ways you can raise capital by debentures. Now that is a contract with another person, a debenture holder who has a contract with you. He like fixed deposit, he pays money, he puts in here, and you are giving a fixed return. Share warrant is also another contract. So share warrants, debentures are additional ways of where you raise capital. So the share capital and the shareholders are only these, right? Simply, they just tell you how to create money for the company. So all those, the shareholders, share capital, you know what, who's a shareholder is set out very clearly is 86. Shareholders have certain rights. You have rights to attend meetings. Shareholders have rights to the documents. Shareholders have rights to vote, right? All those are set out in your articles. Now, the magic numbers you got to keep in mind is 4951 is if you have 51% of the share capital, you are in the majority. That will be reflected on the board as well. For 51%, 50 or more, you can pass a ordinary resolution, right? Section 91, ordinary resolution. See. Then, if you have 75% or more, you can pass a special resolution. Section 91 talks about ordinary resolution. Section 92 speaks about special resolution. You see? So if you have 75% or more, you can pass a special resolution. If you have 85% or more, you can even pass a, right? Section 144 deals with a circular resolution. Now you would see the magic numbers. Why you want more than 51? You can pass ordinary resolution. Why you want 75%? For sitting pretty, you can pass a special resolution. And then where you need to pass special resolutions are there in section 92. And then under 144, if you have 85%, you can even pass the circular resolution. You can do away with physical AGM, EGM, whatever. You see? So these are the magic. Now I would business 50-50. That is a problem from the word go. I can one cases where fighting when you do 50-50 business. For 50, you will directors, for the other 50, you have 3 directors. So never-ending fights. You can't pass a special resolution, you can't pass order resolution. It's a deadlock. Never advise any client to go for 50-50. Right? Let them do a partnership business or partnership arrangement, that's fine. But never incorporate companies with 50-50. There are enough and more problems. Corporate world, we have series of cases. Sometimes, I mean, if you have children, never give one house to 2 people. Sometimes you may be able to, you may give one to a child and the other money to the other. It is still better. If you give one house to 2 people, there you are creating a problem themselves. Well, it'll be fine then until they get married. Then once they get married, one person wants to sell, the other person doesn't want to sell. So here's a deadlock. It's the same with companies. So we have come to the fourth point, the fifth point, shareholders and share capital. Sixth point is an absolutely important point, is the board of directors, right? It's an absolutely important section, directors and board of directors. Now, section 184 of the Companies Act, for the very first time, we never had in any of our earlier statutes, specifically says in black and white that shareholders appoint a board of directors to run the company. Shareholders don't run companies. If shareholders go to run company, John Keells would be run by millions of shareholders. Shareholders appoint a board of directors to run a company, right? So shareholders must appoint the correct people. If you put the wrong people, it will be like our parliament. You appoint the, from the day we have got independence, we have seen this, and later on we complain. And it is the same story. If you put the wrong people, to manage your company, you would know what the outcome is. So you got to ensure that you appoint the correct people, board of directors. Now, in the Companies Act, under section 529 definition section, a director is defined. That is a fairly detailed definition of a director. Who is a director? Well, your Form 15 director is one, recorded in the Register of Companies. You can have a director who is not named a director, but who functions as a director. You know, there are companies where you do puppeteering. Such people also can't be called as. There are certain companies here. None of the directors are here. They are all overseas. There is a country manager who runs the company. That fellow also can be caught up as a director under our definition, under the control test. So definition of a director is very wide. And the other thing is, company law, Companies Act in the 534 sections talks only about the board of directors and directors. It doesn't talk about executive director, non-executive director, managing director, right? They are all in your own articles, not in the Companies Act. And there'll be another category that comes in, non-executive independent directors, right? They come from the corporate governance mechanisms. Those words are not seen in your any of the sections of the Companies Act. If you read 534 sections and tell me whether you see the words managing director, executive director, non-executive director, independent director, alternate director, nowhere in the 534 sections. You can have your articles can have standing director, sitting director, alternate director, all that. But all that is your internal matter. Companies Act deals with board of directors and directors. So 184 tells you that the board has to be by the shareholders. Simply that shareholders don't run companies. In Sri Lanka, we have one board director. In international world, we have two-tier boards. One policy-making board, which may meet maybe once a year or twice a year, and then another second-tier board, which would basically run the day-to-day business. So the board of directors in Sri Lanka, of course, we have all the companies have only one director, one board, and they run the day-to-day business. You can have executive directors, non-executive directors, all those, right? Most of the banks have one or two executive directors, all the others are non-executive directors. So the importance of running a company is by the board of directors. 186 says the board of directors it has to be read with section schedule 3. There are certain things the board of directors can delegate, and there are certain things they cannot delegate. Delegatus is not potest delegare, right? So there are certain functions set out very clearly they cannot delegate. There are certain, internationally you would see, all the big companies, they have hired people to run the company. If you go on a working day on a Monday morning to the golf club, you would see top corporates playing golf. You would wonder how do they do that? Well, they will once every hour they will go and check their iPad to see whether the boys are working properly. So that is one way where you run the business. You have contracted CEOs, paid COOs, paid CFOs. They do the bidding for you, and they are on contract. If you don't perform, out they go. We have seen Apple and Ford company and all the international companies, how they hire and fire. So they are given targets. If they don't meet the targets, they are kicked out. And if you look at in Sri Lanka, the entire corporate sector, now we are fairly young. Long years ago, the boards were average age of a board was 60 plus. Now it's 40 plus. They say between 35 to 45 are the best years now. If you look at Carson's, if you look at Dhammika Perera's operations, all the top organizations, they hire the best. Because now at 35, you have got all the qualifications. So much so that you work so well, you are burnt, and sometimes you retire at 50. But you have achieved everything in life. You have, long years ago, people, what they achieved at 60, 70, you young people achieve now. That's why you get your qualifications very early in life. By 45, and you can retire at 50. So that's the corporate world that is coming to. But I would still prefer the boards to have a mix, because the younger people have that, the attitude to take any chance, whereas the older people will be very conservative. They will think twice before taking a decision. So you need that right mix. Otherwise, you have that you know, the attitude to take chances, which is also not a good thing. So in 186, it says what are the things that can be delegated and what are the things they are responsible. Then 187 is an absolutely important section for every director. It simply says directors have to act in good faith and in the best interest of the company. Right? So what is best interest of the company? So normally the reasonable man, long years ago, there was the case of in England, they said the man who travels the commute of a Clapham bus company is supposed treated as the normal common man. Right? So 187, two things: act in good faith and in the best interest of the company. Now, when you say best interest of the company, 187, one says that you have to look after the best interest of that company alone. Only exception is if you create a subsidiary, if it's 100% subsidiary, that man can look after that subsidiary principal's interest and not the subsidiary's interest. Right? So these are that specifically set out. Otherwise, you have to look after the interest of the company you're in, not the shareholder. Once you are director of a company, you look after the interest of that company, not the man who appointed you, unless it's 100% fully owned subsidiary. 187 is absolutely important. I tell my students, well, put 3 stars to that section. 188, another very important section. You must follow, directors must follow the provisions of the Articles of Association and the provisions of the Companies Act. Very simple. 189 says the standard of care that is expected when you're on the board. You're not supposed to act in a reckless or negligent manner. So 187, 188, 199 puts the heavy burden on the directors. Not only that, 191 to 200 gives the details of conflict of interest in shares and conflict of interest in contracts. You have to be very careful. I'm on a couple of boards. You have to be very careful. Every time I had to record it. So if I'm on the Tokyo Cement board, if they want to buy, say, those cement mixing vehicles, they have to buy from either Tata or Eicher or Leyland. So then they call for 3 tenders, 3 offers. So when this comes up for a decision by the board, right? I'm chairing the board. I just have to say, sorry, I don't want to participate in this decision because Tata's demos are offering. I'm on the demo board. If I don't do that, there'll be conflict of interest. Say if Haley's are borrowing from, say, HNB, I'm on the HNB board and I'm on the Haley's board. I have to divulge the interest both ways because they do dealings, bank loans every time. I have to be very careful and say, I have an interest, I don't take part. Not only me, if there are others who have interest, they have to record. Otherwise, any shareholder can take me to the cleaners, right? So that is called under 91 to 200 deals with contracts, conflict of contracts, conflict of interest in contracts and conflict of interest in shares. I should not go and buy, this company should not buy shares of another company if your wife is the managing director or a senior member of that other company. So 1 to 200. Then 2 important sections, 219 and 220. How directors should act when the company is in a winding up situation. And then 220, when there is serious loss of capital. And if the directors don't act properly in such a situation, they can be held liable personally and criminal and civil both. You can go to jail, not only pay a fine. So 219, 220 are absolutely important, where you have to. So when you take 187, 188, 189, 191 to 200, 219, 220, then there is 57, 58, solvency test, stated capital. They're again very important, solvency test, because shareholders get to know later. Now, solvency test doesn't mean that if the company is not solvent, you have to close shop and run home. No. If the solvency test, actually solvency test is the golden, the entire fabric of company law. You can't do anything it's reasonable, important if the company is not solvent. You can't issue bonus shares, you can't issue dividends, you can't buy back shares, you can't have tamashas. Now, if they followed that, golden key would not have happened. The company was solvent, but the directors were solvent, right? But so the issue is that makes sure that that doesn't mean that you have to, but that has to say that, because the solvency test is like the red light that comes up in your dashboard when the petrol level is low. Now that's an indication to the driver, not to your wife or the children in the car. Shareholders don't know about this. So if the solvency level is bad, it's first an indication to the board of directors. If they do it, they ignore and go ahead and do something, they are personally liable. So solvency test is like, rupees in your pocket. You don't walk into Hilton to have dinner, but that doesn't mean that you're going to starve. You can go to Rahimas and have a good biryani for 350. Or you go to the university, in front of the university, you get your university bath packet at 75 rupees. So you won't starve, but you have to act accordingly, not to try to, overdo. Be within your means. That is the purpose of the solvency test, right? 57, 58, very important. Stated capital and solvency test is 57, right? Very important feature. So when you take all these, there is a lot of responsibility cast on the board of directors, but there are defenses. One defense is 190. 190 says you can rely on your own expertise, you can rely on the expertise within the company, you can rely on the external expertise. Now, if there is a crucial matter, a decision has to be taken. Well, I am no expert in tax law, so I can say, why don't we get a legal opinion from the E&Y tax department? Or you can get two. Why don't we get another one from KPMG? So then I have not acted in a reckless manner. No one can blame me later on. You can rely on your own now. I'm no expert in finance, but I have to take a decision. I say I rely on my my financial controllers expertise, or I rely on my financial director's expertise. There are double accountants, experts. So, but to keep those for a rainy day. Now, of course, emails are there. You can, all those can be kept, right? So that you have not acted in a reckless or negligent manner. So that is an important point, point number 6, board of directors. Then we come to point number 7, another important area, meetings. Now, meetings are all covered in the Companies Act from 133 to 147. Very important, right? Meetings. Now, entire set of meetings are covered from 133 to 147. In fact, I gave some, when I was teaching at the University of Colombo, I gave an assignment for the students, English medium students, and they came out brilliant, right? And they are top, right now they're holding fantastic jobs because their knowledge on those meetings alone helped them to go places. There are two types of meetings. You have the board meetings and shareholders meetings. Board meetings are governed by your own articles of association, read with the Companies Act. But shareholders meetings are important. There again, the articles will say you, but they are within the parameters of the Companies Act 133 to 147. Very simple. There are only two types of meetings. Members meetings or shareholders meetings are two types. One is the annual general meeting, which you hold once every year. And the other one is the extraordinary general meeting you hold. Those are all shareholders meetings. In addition, you must know, for these meetings, you must pass resolutions. You must requisition a meeting. What are the different types of resolutions? You pass ordinary resolutions and special resolutions. Ordinary resolutions under 91, and special resolutions under 92, circular resolutions under 144. So all those are set out very clearly. The notices to be given, right? 21 days notice, 14 days notice. You can master it in no time. Once you read 133 to 147 twice or thrice, you become an expert and nothing to worry about that. So these are the meetings that we talk about. Then we come to, that's entirety of meetings will come to, then section point number 8 is company contracts, right? Section 19 deals with company contracts. Company, like a human being, has to enter into contract. You have to enter into day in, day out, you have to enter into contracts. So section 19 deals with company contract. Then point number 9, borrowings. Well, companies have to borrow. You have to go to banks, you have to go to lending institutions, enter into contracts and borrow, long-term borrowing, short-term borrowing, right? All those are set out in your accounts and whatever. Then point number 10, company disputes. Like human beings, companies also have disputes. Shareholders have disputes, minority shareholders with majority shareholders, shareholders with directors, shareholders with the company, directors among themselves, shareholders and part of directors. So these are called company disputes. So most of the common company disputes where we live on, right, because bread and butter for us, is section 224 and 225, oppression and mismanagement. Then section 234, derivative actions. These are the common company disputes. Then rectification of the share register, you have section 125. But the most common share, the disputes, when you come to practice, you realize 224, 225, we file at least about 5 to 50 to 75 cases every year. Top big companies, small companies, foreign companies, they all have disputes. Very rarely you have companies where they don't have disputes. So 224, 225, 220, 234, derivative action. For 224, 225, you must have at least 5% threshold to institute the action. 234, you don't want it, derivative action, but you have to get leave of court. Derivative action, you derive a right from it. So it's exception to the Foss versus Harbottle rule. You derive the right of the company. Derive, that is why it's derivative. You step into the shoes of the company. So you file action for and on behalf of the company. Then point number 11, there are miscellaneous sections you got to keep in mind. Some I mentioned, 57 solvency rate, 58 stated capital, 185 major transactions. Unlike those days, the company cannot do major transactions. The major transaction is defined. If you want to buy or sell more than half the net worth of the company, you have to get a special resolution passed, right? So it's defined what a major transaction is, and you can't. So those days, you can sell your family silver and tell the board. The shareholders will get to know only at the AGM, right? So by the time it is all gone, here now you can't do that. You cannot buy or sell those. You can't enter into major transactions without a special resolution. Special resolution is 75%. So it's not easy. So that's a tab you keep on the board. Then point number 12, important person of this company is the company secretary, right? Company secretary qualifications are not set out in the Companies Act. They are to be seen in the company's regulations under the Companies Act. Company secretary has to be a qualified person. It has to be, she or she has to be a company secretary, chartered secretary, or a chartered accountant, or an attorney at law. If the company's share capital is below 500,000, or the turnover, annual turnover is below 1 million, you don't need this qualification. Anyone can be a company secretary. Company secretary is the one who has the custody of all these documentation. That is the link between the registrar of companies. So the company secretary is a very, very important role. Sometimes board members are company secretaries, and the company secretary has to advise the board. Yes, she or she has to be thorough. Point number 13, accounts and audit, right? Financial accounting and audit, important feature. 148 to 170 deals with this aspect, accounts and audit. Every company has to maintain, in certain private companies, unless you are asked for by the registrar, you don't have to. Otherwise, you must maintain your accounts. And an audit is important. Even individuals, we get our accounts audited because you have to pay taxes. So that's a very important role, how to file financial accounts, how to do your annual accounts. You would see in your annual report, the auditor's role, appointment of auditor, removal of auditor, all that is there. That's the 13th point. Then we come to the 14th point, the end of this cycle, winding up. When a human being goes beyond, we have say, comes to a stage where you don't have oxygen to go beyond that, you die, 70 or 80. A company also comes to a stage where they don't have oxygen, that is the funding. Then they have to close shop. That is called winding up. Winding up can be winding up by the shareholders, winding up by the creditors, members winding up or creditors winding up. Say inability to pay debts, the company is unable to pay a debt of 50,000, party creditor can move to wind up the company. There's winding up by under the direction of supervision of court, where you appoint a liquidator, and the liquidator close shop. Liquidator's job is like, Jayaratnas or A-framers to give a decent burial. The liquidator will look at the basic what are the assets, what are the liabilities, and very often the assets are not enough to meet the liabilities, and then close shop and get that debt certificate from the registrar of companies, striking off. In addition, we don't have restructuring, but we have another area called administrator. Under section 400 to 426, you can appoint an administrator to restructure and do something, just see whether the US where restructuring take place. So from the birth to the death, the regulatory element or the regime, where we say public listed PLC. When the company is under the purview of the securities regime. What is the securities regime? Securities regime, on top you have the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission. It has SEC Act and the SEC rules. Below that, you have the Colombo Stock Exchange. You have the CSC rules. Below that, you have CDS, the Central Depository System. They have CDS rules. That is where the transactions, buying and selling of the shares take place, the trading flow. So the securities regime is only that. That is the SEC, that is the CSC, CDS. So only public listed companies come under that. All the other companies don't come under that. Why? Because if you are asking people to invest in your private company, single shareholder company, guarantee company, you can do whatever as long as you don't cheat your creditors. But in a public listed company, like in the banks, it's not the shareholders' money, it is the depositors' money. The same way in a public listed company, it is the public money that is used. So therefore, must have a regulator. So this regulation is tighter. In addition to all your provisions of the Companies Act, they have insider trading, directors' responsibilities in a tighter way. So for companies that come under the securities regime, corporate governance is mandatory, right? Corporate governance is good governance. Corporate governance, other companies can follow if they want. If you can, regulatory regime is the Securities Exchange Commission, under that the Colombo Stock Exchange, and under that the CDS, Central Depository System. So, corporate governance is something that started in 1992 in England, right, with Sir Adrian Cadbury. The Cadbury Code was brought in for all listed companies in the London Stock Exchange. So our corporate governance started after, and we have our own code. We have the code of best practice, and we have the mandatory code and the voluntary code. Anyone who wants to just log into the SEC web page, look at the the mandatory code and the voluntary code. Voluntary code is very wide, but the mandatory code is very limited. All listed companies must have X amount of independent directors. That is, if your company has in your board of directors, one third of your board must be non-executive. One third of the non-executive must be independent. So what is independent is defined there. In addition, you must have compulsory committees. You must have the Remuneration Committee and the Audit Committee. In addition, now they have the Related Party Transactions Committee. But there is another regulator that comes in. That is the banking regulator. If the company is a bank, licensed bank, you come under the Central Bank Monetary Board regulation. That's also regulated, like the securities regime. So there you have the Companies Act, you have the securities regime, and the banking. For banking, they have bank supervision, and for non-bank, they have non-bank supervisions for finance companies, leasing companies, hire purchase companies. That's very stringent. So if you are working in a bank, you know that you come under those regulatory elements as well. They also have stringent corporate governance. So SEC has only those two, but they are introducing so many. They will come in the time to come. So that is the corporate governance regime. So long years ago, corporate governance was considered, right? If the company was, say, what if corporate governance is? The company is good governance, like the Yahapalanel, these words, right? The company is a good place, it's a good corporate citizen, it is all the transactions are transparent, right? Nothing bad is done in this company. That is where you get awards for, good corporate citizens and so on and so forth. There you have to say, okay, the norm is 1% of your turnover, minimum is 1%, you can go up to 10% if you want. 1% of your turnover you spend on corporate social responsibility, and corporate social responsibility is the other end of corporate governance. You run that extra mile. You're not limiting to, right? You do something more than that. Now LOLC Group, they have centers in Habarana and a couple of other places where they treat the free treatment for kidney patients because of this water. Then Haley's have a mechanism where they give free water. Tokyo Cement has a mechanism where they provide free water because of these kidney diseases. Then they look after, now Tokyo Cement, we look after the CSR projects, are looking after the corals, and then saving the carbon footprint. Demos have something. So all these companies, now best example is you do something more than what is expected of you. Now, for example, Utara's Udell, Utara started the Embark project. Now, Embark project is to, look after these stray dogs in Colombo in the streets. So give a good shampooing and wash on a Sunday. Now, that has nothing to do with the garment business. That is to show that you are a good corporate citizen. You do much more for the citizen. So long years ago, corporations or companies were considered good companies if they made profits. Not anymore. You can't make profits by sacrificing the environment. You can't make profits by sacrificing your employees. So good corporate governance is the company is a good place to work. It makes profits. It looks after its employees. It looks after its shareholders, majority and minority. It looks after its customers. It looks after all the stakeholders, creditors, and the world at large. That is where CSR comes in. So now in 15 points, I have told you the entirety of corporate law and company law. I don't consider it difficult. It's a very, very interesting, happening, lively subject. So I'm giving you the opportunity to ask any question related, unrelated from any section of the 534 sections. All right, all about company law, anything about company law, any related, unrelated matter. And if you're interested in reading more, I would suggest you, because all the books will have what I just said, nothing more, right? But I must tell you, if you want additional knowledge on this subject, read books like Gover on Company Law. That is the Bible on company law, the world's best book on company law. Farrer on Company Law, another great book. Pennington on Company Law, excellent books. There are enough and more books, right, in India. So many books on company law. In Sri Lanka, there are several books. You have Dr. Kanagiswaran's book on company law. You have Mr. Neelakandan's book on company law. Then you have Dr. Arita Vikramanayaka's book on company law. Then I have about 3 books on company law. This is the Companies Act number 7 of 2007 and the Corporate Law of Sri Lanka. I told Mr. Srinivasan that collect some copies for your library. I will give some free copies, right? This has the entirety of the company law in Sri Lanka, how it came, all the sections, whatever. And then I have another book on duties of company directors and corporate governance in Sri Lanka. These also entirety of corporate governance mechanisms and the securities regime, everything is there. I'll send some copies to your library free of charge. Please make some arrangements. And then I have another book on derivative action. That was my PhD thesis long years ago. And then right now I'm doing a case book on company law that will come in 3 volumes. I have some other, it will be something like this. For IP law, I have put out this, thanks to COVID holidays, I did this, these IP law volume 1 cases from IP law reports 1888 to 2020, and IB arbitration I have done from 1895 to 2020 in 1 volume. Company law will be in 3 volumes, starting from 1885 to 2021. That is just being out. Maybe it'll be out next month or so. So if you want more reading on the subject, you're free to read and enhance your knowledge, but it's a very simple subject. This is how you understand the subjects. So please feel free to ask any question, related, unrelated, doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you very much for your insight, sir. You showed us A to Z in the Companies Act within hours. It is amazing. Dear students, if you want to ask questions or if you want to clarify any points, you may directly ask Dr. Harsha Cabral. He's very happy to answer your questions.
I'm sorry because I had to go fast to cover that, because if I were to cover this now, of course, I don't have the time to lecture. I used to do University of Colombo 60 hours for the whole year. All these 15 points I was doing 1 year, right? I might take 3 months for directors, articles, 2 months, smaller ones, maybe 1 month. Or if I do the same thing for master's students, I would take 2 years. And if it's for a PhD student, I might take 4 years. So that is the synopsis was given in 1 hour. So you have to pardon me for doing it fast.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, students?
Even the lecturers
good
are
morning,
free to
sir.
ask any question. I know there are lecturers also. Yes, please.
Go.
Good morning, sir. My name is Mindu Vilevada, and I have 3 questions, sir. The first question is, so you mentioned the importance of board of directors in a company.
Sorry?
But sir, I would like to ask,